Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we will be taking a look at what if World War III broke out. Right now, no break-in times, just breaks out right now. And so yeah, let's get into it. So this war will start with Russia being the attacker. Russia will call Belarus into a war against Ukraine. And this is how this war will start out. So Russia, for now, key things will stay the same. Russia will start moving. Oops, forget to turn that off. Russia will start moving people across the Ukrainian border. Eventually, cutting off their border and moving in, eventually capturing Kyiv. But as troops start moving in from Belarus in this side, some troops accidentally start moving into Poland, thinking it's part of Ukraine. And this draws Poland into the war, which activates NATO. Article 5 of NATO. Which includes all of these countries. Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey. Croatia, Luxembourg, Denmark, Sweden, the entirety of the Baltics. Nordic countries, up here, Iceland, Greenland. The United States and Canada. And yeah, so NATO has been activated. And with that, a war will start to commence. But Georgia will also try to join this war, and South Ossetia and Abkhazia will then be, reinstated as being occupied by Russia. That's around there. Turkey will get Azerbaijan to join in. Iran will join in. Not that color. Iran will join in on the side of them. Russia will make Kazakhstan join. China will choose to join but with North Korea. South Korea will join. Japan will join this war. Taiwan will join. Philippines will join. Australia will join. And New Zealand will join. Vietnam will also join on the side of the Americans, as well as, well, India has ties with both Russia and the United States, so they would just stay out of this war. Pakistan, on the other hand, will join China, as they both have right, which will then force India, not force, but make them choose to join. Bangladesh will choose them. That's at China. Central Asia will just pretty much fold over. I'm going to leave those two out because they're still fighting each other. Mongolia will stay neutral. They will get... Oh, I almost forgot to color in more people down here. They're in NATO as well. They will get Moldova to join in. They will get Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Serbia. Neutral nations will stay neutral. Venezuela will join, and Nicaragua will join. Cuba will join. I don't know about Cuba, actually. The United States will make Panama and Costa Rica join so they can seize the canal. Make it so no trade can go through. Colombia will join because they hate Venezuela. People around Venezuela will start to join. That's French. It's Francois. I think everyone else would stay neutral. It's part of the United States. I believe that's it. Syria will nope, Syria's still in civil war stuff. They might get this. Nah, they probably wouldn't, though. I'm thinking that's it. So before we go on, just need to take a quick screenshot for the title. But yeah. So with NATO's join into this war, Russia will first see a bit of pushback from Ukraine and Poland, as well as push into Belarus. Kaliningrad will be seized, and most of the border down here will be taken. There will be a stalemate in Finland, except for here up in Karele, in the Kuril Peninsula. Estonia will start being invaded, as well as Latvia and Lithuania. They will push into them as they are weak compared to Russia. And slowly but surely, they will be taking them, even moving slightly into Poland and trying to liberate Kaliningrad. Failing to do so, meaning supply lines still are holding out with this, as Poland starts to push slightly back from the Russian offensive here, and a stalemate is drawn here as Russia starts going for more of Estonia, eventually capitulating the country. Latvia and Lithuania eventually both fall, but that does not stop NATO from pushing back into Kaliningrad and more into Belarus, eventually meeting up more with the Ukrainian border and threatening an encirclement of Russian troops, causing them to withdraw from the area. Still capturing Kyiv. Still holding. I think Kyiv's right there. I think Kyiv's like right here. But I don't know. Serbia's kind of surrounded, so I think we all know what happens to them. As NATO is not really focused on the Caucasus right now. Iran and Russia will start pushing into Azerbaijan and Georgia. There are mountains here, but geography is nowhere in this universe. Eventually, Azerbaijan, after putting up a very good fight, as well as Georgia, will capitulate, but costing many, like hundreds of thousands of men. Eventually, Armenia will join the side of Russia as they start pushing into Turkey. At this point, Turkey would start to reinforce up here, pushing them back a little bit, and ultimately pushing into the Iranian, that's the wrong color, front line over here, and threatening to cut off Iran in a sort of small spearhead to try to cut Iran off from the conflict, which will go in a resounding, horrible thing, causing Turkey to get almost pushed completely back and invaded in the southern parts over here. So right now, it looks more like Russia's side is winning, but that's only because we've looked at this. Alright, now to take a look at this. Alright, South American theater is done. Alright, back to Asia. We could actually move. Thank you. So, with Bangladesh joining, India chooses to focus some of their troops here. Bangladesh does put up a huge fight as Pakistan and China occupy Kashmir, the northern parts of Kashmir. As it's both Pakistan and China, and India has a lot of things that there's going on right now because they're in a war. So northern Kashmir will be taken, but southern Pakistan will be invaded and taken over as they push further and further into the thing. Did I make Afghanistan join this war on accident? I did. Did not mean to make Afghanistan join this war. Alright. But as troops start pushing more into here, India tries to push back in the northeast as they lose more ground to Pakistan in the northwest. They eventually make a spearhead to try to cut Pakistan off, which is a resounding success. So Chinese troops will now have to go up and around instead of going straight through, as India starts to dwindle down the forces and make this little outpush over here a little bit smaller as they grow this part over here. Eventually trying to push a spearhead to the capital, eventually taking Pakistan's capital, but not causing them to surrender. In this front over here, we see Bangladesh being slowly dwindled down, and eventually Bangladesh will surrender after a long time of fighting, occupying a lot of troops. This island over here will be taken, as well as landings being made by the Philippines and Taiwan. But these landings in mainland China will be swiftly pushed out. Will be swiftly pushed out, and another naval landing will be made here, and almost pushed out, though not entirely pushed out. China will push Taiwan out of their country, make a naval landing into Taiwan, but then get pushed back by the U.S. forces as the United States also makes multiple small naval landings in North and northern and southern China, if I could actually like click correctly, making 2, even 3 fronts for China to worry about. As we know, the tensions between Taiwan and China have made U.S. ships stay closer to this area. North Korea will start sending down, that is the wrong thing. Will start sending down troops into South Korea, eventually aiming to take Seoul and taking it. They will eventually push South Korea down to southern areas before United States troops also get there and start pushing back the Chinese and North Koreans. Till eventually they reach the border. A little bit of pushback is found over here, but they do not get near Pyongyang, which is like right here, I believe. I think it's right there. No nukes will be used, as it kind of ruins things. But Japan will start to invade the Kuril Islands and successfully invade all of the Kuril Islands. I think they're Russian. They also invade up here in this peninsula, and they will also take Sakhalin fully over with the help of United States forces. Vietnam will start to push up in the east and the western fronts, eventually causing quite a big encirclement over here. They'll be holding out, but eventually will dwindle down and troops will be captured or killed. Mostly captured. But in the center, they do leave a big gap to where China pushes in and spearheads down and cuts off these troops, which is a resounding success, causing the Chinese troops to be able to push them back, not fully out of Chinese core territory, but mostly out, and will push all the way out of mainland Vietnam. But eventually, Vietnam will have a huge counteroffensive coming from the south, pushing China almost all the way out of their borders and being able to retreat their men back into homeland country and pushing further in to southern China. Over here, the Philippines will make another naval invasion of China over here, eventually cutting off these troops and making them have to evacuate via naval things, which ships either get blown up or captured. China will have some resounding success near Beijing, where they will push America completely out, as well as over here, they will not push them completely out, but the front line in the southern parts do start to try to meet up. They will branch out, trying to cause encirclements, but also get, killed just a bit. They will try to branch out, and eventually it will create a huge encirclement with the help of the Vietnamese and Filipinos, and eventually they will completely push the Chinese out of this part of China, and the Vietnamese will eventually fully connect up with this front line, threatening to encircle the Chinese in the country, causing them to flee and that stuff. At this point, China will call Laos into the war, Laos and Cambodia, to serve as a distraction to Vietnam. Vietnam was expecting this, though, that is the eraser. So in the south, they start to push Cambodia up and around. But Laos, they fear invading them for all of the landmines that are still there. They will take some area up here. That is not how much they take. They do invade northern Laos and some of the Laos border, but they do not touch the south, and they just hold a front line here. They take a little bit of land in some places from Laos, and they expand the front line with Cambodia. But overall, there's a lot of landmines, and they don't want to risk it. Over here, we see Turkey start to push Iran back and start another counteroffensive into Iran. This one is a resounding success as they start to re-liberate themselves and Azerbaijan, claiming this exclave and starting to invade into Armenia, eventually meeting up with actual Azerbaijan and starting to liberate the country, which as rebel groups also pop up and start to help out the Turkish. They will eventually completely liberate the country, and they will eventually completely capitulate Armenia and start to invade further into Iran. Though there is zero threat over here, there is still internal affairs going on. The U.S. will make a few naval landings down here that'll eventually all just be pushed out multiple times over, but will lead for a good distraction to cause Turkey and Azerbaijan to push further and further into the northern parts of Iran, going further south. I think this is where the plains are. I don't know. Again, not listening to geography. They will push south, trying to cut off and meet the ocean, the sea, over here. They will also make a little bit of an offensive into trying to capture Tehran, but that will be a failure, and Iran will push them back to the Azerbaijani border. Over here, Turkey will officially completely push out what? No. They will officially fully push out them from Georgia and Turkey. Well, not Georgia, but just Turkey, and they will start to liberate Georgia. But Russia is holding these front lines as they do not want the Caucasus oil fields to be taken. As they start pushing further into Azerbaijan to try to put up a little bit of a buffer zone and set up trenches. Yes, they're going back to trench warfare. Back up here in Europe, we have Russia going for further things to get around and try to cause an encirclement in Belarus of Polish troops, which eventually does happen, and they are all captured. Over here in Siberia, we have the Japanese making another naval landing, and they start taking the more populated areas of Siberia and start invading into China and North Korea with the help of U.S. soldiers. And eventually, most of the population centers down here will be taken, and Japan will start rapidly throwing manpower at Russia and taking almost all of this area. In the meantime, the people over here have been just kind of moving up and taking it. There's not really resistance, as no military is really here yet. The United States will cross over into here and help the Japanese out. It is very cold, so they're using a lot of supplies, which is eventually why they choose to just hold out in Siberia. But they do try to focus in on North Korea. As the stalemate is broken, Pyongyang is captured, and eventually, after a few more weeks of fighting, North Korea surrenders, and they start an invasion into China, which the first offensive to try to make a spearhead towards the top goes surprisingly well, as they're not getting any pushback, and eventually the spearhead works, and they eventually meet the border of Mongolia, completely cutting off these troops from the rest of China, and they start pushing them back into Russia. And slowly but surely, they all flee into Russia and start holding a front line. But that they aren't able to fully take it out. They do capture a few major cities along the Chinese coast, but China eventually does start pushing back in the southern parts, pushing this entire offensive out, and starting a second invasion into Taiwan, completely taking the country over, and starting to push back the Americans and Filipinos, as Laos and Cambodia also start to push back a tiny bit, but do not go completely into Vietnam. India starts to lose a little bit of ground here in the north, but they do start pushing further into Pakistan, and eventually they capture all of Pakistan's coast and all of the southern parts of Pakistan, even pushing into a little bit of Iran. They will start moving up in a big flood front line, and eventually will encircle these troops and completely kick them out of India. Eventually, Pakistan will, that's not the right color, surrender, and India will focus more on Kashmir and push China eventually completely out. Now, during these times, the Indian troops over here were not doing so hot, and China has completely pushed them out of this area and has started making an invasion over here and started to liberate some of Bangladesh. But overall, it's not looking too hot for them. Eventually, with internal affairs being drawn in Cambodia, Cambodia will surrender over, and shortly after, Laos will as well. Taiwan will be reliberated by the United States, Philippines, and Vietnam. Over here in the European front, Finland makes a breakthrough in the southern parts, dashing for St. Petersburg, eventually capturing it, with a huge blow to the Russian morale as Finland starts to flood in with the help and support of the rest of the Nordic nations. Russia starts to feel kind of hopeless on the whole front line up here, and eventually Finland takes over all of this peninsula. That's the wrong button. Takes over all of this peninsula, the Kuril Peninsula. No, it's the Kuril Islands. And then something peninsula. I don't know. It might be the Kuril Islands and then the Kuril Peninsula. I don't know. It's something, but they take all of this. They announce that they've created Greater Finland, and Russia will start withdrawing troops from, I don't know what that was all about, from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, causing for pushback, causing them to lose all ground in Poland, all ground in Lithuania, and most ground in Latvia and Estonia. They will also lose major ground in Belarus, and start to lose footing in Ukraine. Eventually, Kyiv will be retaken, though major offensives in southern Ukraine will take place, causing for most of the capture of the Donbass area. Azerbaijan will eventually completely be liberated, as well as Georgia. And soon enough, countries will start dropping out of the war. Turkmenistan. Alright, back to what I was saying. Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan will drop out of the war. Kazakhstan will also drop out of the war. China will try and fail to drop out of the war. Iran will sue for peace. Russia will keep on trying to fight. Bangladesh will surrender fully over to India again after. Jeez, I cannot pick the right color. Gosh. After more land is taken, they will resurrender back to India. India will start to push China back and eventually completely kick them out of India. They will start to have pushback into the Tibetan area of China, going around Nepal. Don't mind the mountains here. This happens over a pretty long time. They will push into here, eventually meeting up with the Vietnamese front line, and they start pushing outwards, eventually capturing most major cities down here in the southern area. They will start pushing up. Naval landings will happen all over China, eventually meeting up, causing one big front line for China to deal with. Eventually, with no hope in sight, China will surrender, or not surrender, but they will sue for white peace. They will try to get white peace, but they will really just sue for peace. And Russia, being alone after many more years of rigorous fighting, will eventually be completely kicked out of Ukraine, completely kicked out of the Baltics, and after many, many more years of fighting, because they do not want to give up, Russia will be completely invaded over here. The Caucasus oil fields will be, that is the wrong button. The Caucasus oil fields will be taken. The iron supplies as well. And they will eventually go all the way up. And a spearhead for Moscow will happen, eventually taking the city. And Russia will inevitably, after a very large offensive happens over the span of 3 years over in the Siberian Peninsula, seizing many oil fields up in the northern parts of Siberia, Russia will eventually surrender and sue. That is the wrong button. And sue for peace. So, at a peace treaty, what I can think of off the top of the head is the United States. The United States would annex Nicaragua. The United States would. Venezuela would be. I'm not going to do the peace treaty. You guys can think of it in your head. I'm just going to explain what I think would happen. Venezuela would be partitioned between Guyana, Brazil, and Colombia. Russia, Ukraine would get small pieces of it. Georgia would get small pieces of it. Azerbaijan would get meh. Turkey would get all of Armenia, the northern parts. Azerbaijan would get the southern parts. Azerbaijan would get the northmost parts of Iran, and Turkey would get that area. India would get all of Pakistan and the Chinese parts of Kashmir, all of Bangladesh. Vietnam would get all of Cambodia and Laos. Taiwan would China's government would be changed to a democracy in charge of Taiwan. Taiwan would fully annex it, and it would just be China under the Taiwanese flag. Russia would be changed into a U.S. protectorate, pretty much. They might even join NATO. NATO might even be disbanded, because the entire reason was the Russian threat, and now Russia's not really a threat. But, yeah. Belarus would be split up between Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine. Latvia would get small parts of Belarus and Russia. Estonia would get a pretty big chunk out of this. Finland would form Greater Finland with all the lands that they had fully done. Norway would get small parts of the northern Kuril Peninsula. Serbia would be, you'd have Bulgaria getting small parts of it. Kosovo would get its full independence. Bosnia and Herzegovina would get small parts of it. Croatia would get the entire northern part of it. Romania would get small parts, and then it would probably join NATO and get put up with a democratic government. And let's see. I think that's everyone. Yep. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. And yeah, I will see you all in the next one. Did you, Ricochet?